Hey, of course I'm starting now. It's 3 a.m. in the morning because I don't know. I got that bad habit. So let's see. What have I done today? I went and I read a bunch of Usenet postings from Linus Torvalds. I have an archive, and the archive is big. Let me see how big it is. Zoom out, volatile. Oh heck, why didn't I just put it over here? Why I hide from people? Yeah, sure. Then I do scale. Then I do Usenet. Let me see how big it is. How much Usenet do I have? And then I have mailing lists in a separate directory on top of this. So as you can tell, this is a very modern machine, and it's a multi-disk array. And it's very fast disks. It's modern, very quick disks, and it's still taking a fuck ton of time to report. In fact, I don't know if it's going to be done. I just realized I injured my finger earlier, and I should put some chemical on it real quick. So I'm going to be back. This makes terrible YouTube. I know, but hey, I'm not a celeb. I don't know if there's any YouTube stars in their 40s, so who knows? I'll be right back. Okay, this is I've got two things. First of all, I have some hand sanitizer from the Engine X organization. And then I have this thing. It says anti-itch, but it's hydrocortisone, which means that it should be fine. It's exactly what I'm looking for, even if it's advertised anti-itch. You know, hydrocortisone makes it. I think hydrocortisone is a steroid cream, but I think, yeah. And I already put some of this stuff on it, but I'll probably do something else later. Oh, there it is, 188 gigs. I have 188 gigs of Usenet posts. Yeah, so I was looking earlier, and, I had this little sort of cat temp Linus one, like every time he was appearing. Right? And so I have all of these things and little mbox things. And then I decided to try to look for where. So here he is. I don't know why those new lines aren't there or being interpreted right, but they're there somewhere. So you have like Torvalds at, which is a thing. Yeah, there, Clava. But it's not always Clava. Sometimes it's CC. There's a lot of clavas here, but I think I can find like an at. Why can't? There it is. There it is. There's CC. Yeah. So those things do exist. They're rare, so you can't just look for the clava. You gotta be a little bit more. Anyway, I read them all. Yeah, I extracted a few things from it. Nothing too new. Let's see. I did some other things. Read some PC Magazine. A few other things. Just trying to back up and find more information. Am I going to do this again? Am I going to do the... Oh, yeah. I also got an email back from the Scale people. And my question was, hey, do you mind if I try this there on Thursday? And they're like, sure, we'll find some time for you to do that. So I got that. Oh, Oh, I've also decided to. Oh yeah, I did that arrangement. And let me tell you a few things about this. Oh look, I disappear. Yeah, it's a screen filter right now, so when it gets bright, you won't be able to see me, which is okay. It's fine. But okay, so in fact, wouldn't it be funny if I just did this? Yeah, and then as it comes in and disappears, you just that's slick. What other kinds of filters do I have? I can do all these different blending. People are like, oh my god, is he really just like playing with OBS right now? Isn't it like he's just said it was 3 a.m. Like, is he really doing that? Yeah, fuck it. All right. So anyway, it'll eventually update. So this one, consumer side comparison, modern internet is about a million. Right, so I thought about this. Modern internet is about a million times faster and about 1/100 the cost. Not really, you had to pay hourly. Oh, that was an interesting thing that I found, is that I thought that, okay, so last night we found out that Linux at 325 was a per disk, and the minimum number of disks was 19 disks for distribution. So I tried to see how unique that was. I was like, let me look for CD-ROMs, and I did. I got this very interesting. I actually tweeted about it, and I put it on my server, so I can just find it over here real quick. And if I just go up here, LSLTR tail, and yeah, so if I let Less Digest 84, we can see some interesting things over here. Essentially, let me move this thing off to the side. Come on, darkness. Darkness, you can come back. Just move these things over to make this thing a little bit more clear. What's going on here? I don't need that. Okay, so. Oh, that's just setting up my Pavu control. And that's just, who cares? So you look at this thing through for dollar signs, right? And we see, okay, a $30. But it turned out this guy, this Jana thing, he was actually like kind of, maybe it was just intentions that he couldn't fulfill. But he was like, oh, it's a subscription service. And people are like, yo, you said 6 and I got 2. Like, what's up with that shit? And so people are complaining about it. So I don't quite know if that's real. Oh, yeah, but look at this thing. So here's one. They're offering OSF Motif for Linux at $200 for that. And then, yeah, $299 for that. And then, oh yeah, here it is. Here's the Jana CD. So here's the Jana guy. And it's up. Shit. Yeah, Jana at Jana.com. I wonder if he still owns that. I bet you he doesn't. I bet he's let that lapse. And it's like a giant company now. Watch, it's the same thing. It's like, yo, you want a CD? Come on, man. Who is Jana.com? Oh yeah, no. It's somebody in India. Let's see, domains by proxy. What's the date? Oh, GoDaddy. No way. It's somebody else. He let it lapse. It'd be fun though. Anyway, so 4-letter domain. God, so you can do in 1993. For like cheap. Yeah, so he had a 1-year subscription at $60, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. What did I just do that for? Anyway, so there's also, oh yeah, SLS CD-ROM, $99, $200 for a quarterly subscription. So this wasn't cheap. Oh, here's the discs. Here's the thing that we saw in that magazine. Here, so if you want the 30 discs on 3.5 inch, it's $150. This is not cheap. Especially this is like, $1993. And even the CD-ROM, they're charging $100 for. So like, let's try Mr. Inflation Calculator, CPI, at the BLS.gov. It's a famous one. So if we're doing like $99 and $1993, $200, $214, that's, I mean, really, like Windows 11 price, $139. It's like, it's more expensive. Oh, Pro is $200. Look at that. Yeah. So the idea of, I mean, they were very adamant early on about saying, it's free as in freedom and not free as in. Oh yeah, and then support. Support was $1,000 a year. Up here, look at this. And I mean, it was good that companies came forward real fast and said, no, we're going to, you can get cheaper ones. So here's Yugodrazo doing $60. Or, production, also doing $100. Yeah, I saw some, so this was just one point, 1993, September 29th, 93. And as the time went on after this, the prices started dropping precipitously, and they are getting down in the 20s. I guess? I don't know. But this is 2 years in, right? First code release was October 91. This is in September 93. This is prior to 1.0, prior to Debian. It might be Slackware might actually be on here. I think Slackware is already out. Yeah, Slackware is there. Oh, and then they had these CDs, which combined the two of them. They were on the same release. And I think I might have had one of those. I think I might have had one. Now that I remember it, there's no way I still have that. No way. I had a bunch of early ones and early releases. I think I threw them out like, oh God. How long ago was that? 20 years maybe? Yeah, I might have had that. Who knows? I might have even installed it. No, I'd have thrown them out over 20 years ago. Anyway, who knows? I don't have records of that. I don't have emails. I don't have anything, right? There's absolutely nothing other than my personal testament. Even if I was going to go try to find the CDs, it's like, shit, they'd be hard to find. I was doing this in 96, 95, somewhere around there, about 30 years ago. That's when I started. So, anyway, let's stop this old man reminiscing shit. I'm too young for that. And I will always be too young for that, even in 40 years. And let's actually go through the entire thing. And hopefully it'll be done by 4 a.m. So let's move this out of the way. Let's move this up to, oh my God. God, just, you can do this. Oh, look at that. It's like this is like, there's an Amiga thing called Video Toaster, and I realized that actually, you can hear when I play these videos. I didn't realize that. And so I was talking over one, and it sounded really bad. It's like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And I'd have to do a mix, but I don't actually get the mix. Oh, I will. So I can direct that with Pavu control to make sure that I'm getting the mix in my headphones. So then I get the feedback loop already, so then I can modify things accordingly. So let me just see if I can find the Video Toaster. Oh my God, look at this guy. He's selecting shipping supplies with a little wagon, going around trying to do a bunch of shipments tomorrow. It's like guy I've known for a long time. So there's let's just watch a video. Promo. Is it? So whenever I do stuff like that, there's a bunch of people like these YouTubers, and they'll like come in their face. Hi, I'm going to talk today about Video Toaster. Blah 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 blah. And you're like, oh shit, man. You know, it's these like super fucking high energy things with these like really washed out lighting, and like, you know, these like sound effects, ding, all this crazy bullshit going on. It is so fucking crazy. Anyway, here. So this audio. Oh, I can hear it. Good. Here it is. Yeah, we're watching YouTube together. Yeah, it's true. It's true. But this was on an Amiga back in the day. Let me move this thing down just to be sure. And, oh yeah, they have this stupid thing right here. But then I would get to something really wacky, I think. Yeah, it's here. Here it is. And it's just like, oh no, there's another demo here. It doesn't do the full demo. Shit. It's like, it's this stuff. It's just these cheesy like 90s graphics that you'd see in like rave videos back in the day. Because they would make the music, like this music was made in Tracker. So it was like Soundtracker Pro. And then they would actually do the video with the same Amiga. And so all of this thing was done on like an Amiga. So yeah, the entire thing was. There's, oh God. And they have this 3D thing in there. And the 3D thing is still an active project, the Video Toaster 3D animator. They forked it off to a different company, and it's actually one of the big ones today. I think it's like Lightwave. I'd have to look it up. But I think that Video Toaster 3D was, yeah, Lightwave. There it is. Lightwave, which is, you know, still around and still a big fucking deal. There it is. Released date 1990. So Amiga OS. Yeah, it was initially on the Video Toaster. It was just a feature for this initial product, and then now it's its own thing by its own company. They spun it off. Yeah. Oh, here it is. Videoscape 3D. And the NewTek, which did the Video Toaster. There it is. All right, well. Let's go to the history that I planned as opposed to just doing random history. It's funny because now I'm getting like references to these YouTubers that are doing computer history, but they're not very good at it. And so they have like all these fucking mistakes in it. I'm like, God, how does this thing have 11 million views? You motherfuckers. Because they do. They get a lot of views. And it's like mostly wrong shit. Anyway, I'm more careful than that. I've been shooting this shit now for 20 minutes, so let me actually do this for real. Okay, I guess that it'll be done in an hour if I do it right. We're gonna do Linux and microcomputer. Let's do this. Starting now. I'll call this 20. Linux and microcomputer processors. Already fucked up. Linux and its microcomputer predecessors pre-1996. I wonder if I'm going to fuck up when I'm doing this thing at 1 p.m. It'll be like, I've never done this before midnight before. Then we do the next one. Actually, hold on, we can do this one. Yeah, so this week, what I need to do is I'll need to get all of this code up and running. It's just kind of a nascent thing, and I need to stop being so lazy. I used to be like a hardcore programmer, but I don't know. I just don't do a lot of shit these days. I'm still burned out, I think, from the last 2 gigs. Anyway, this is the general talk. If you find any mistakes, I built something for you to correct me, or I will. If you also find the script I'm reading, this is a general talk. Why is this thing not working? Is the battery low? Oh, it's because I need to focus on a fucking window. How's that? This is general talk, so here are some players for a 20th Century Journey if you haven't met them. Let's warm up the time machine. We all use Linux even if we don't know it. Whenever you see a machine you reboot at the grocery store, it's like, oh hey, there's that penguin again. Linux has arguably become the most ubiquitous operating system. How did that happen? The story usually given is an undergrad posted about his hobby project on a bunch of people helped out. Now let me go and put this in viewing mode like I was doing beforehand. Wait, a college kid with a hobby project started a computer revolution by posting? That's absurd. What about these other things? They're only the Unixist ones. Oberon by Pascal's Nicholas Wirth is from 1907, and there were many other ones that didn't make the deck. But these did. Here's various commercial efforts. Some of these are complete systems, others are kernels. The lines are between the first and last release. The point is, Linus wasn't shouting out from the wilderness. There's a vibrant PC Unix ecosystem that predated him, an industry which hasn't had a lasting impact. Products such as Xenix and Coherent were hot stuff at one time, but now are the works of Ozymandias. Look on the timeline, ye mighty, and despair. That's because this guy, Genghis Khan, the Unix war. There's only one commercial Unix without hardware attached to it still around. Unix Xinuas 7 Definitive 2018, which was last actually released in 2017, and that's it. It's deader than dial-up. But Mr. Mackenzie, there's more to the story. What about the BSD lawsuit? Well, what about it? BSD has a history stretching back to 1976. The two names for a story are husband and wife team, Bill and Lynn Jolitz. Why didn't that win a Unix war? This is usually given, but it's not persuasive. BSD is much older. In an interview with Bill Jolitz in 1994, he said he started working on 386 BSD in 1986, even though only Net 1 and Net 2 were released in that interim. Also, there were 5 lawsuits that held up Linux in court over a decade. Did that affect its development? Okay, let's assume there was a 2-year hold in BSD. We should go over to, say, Usenet and see a fair amount of silence during that time. But in fact, we don't. This is just over 2 days. It was lively and vibrant. There's no evidence of any chilling effect. The highlighted post is an update on the lawsuits, amidst a bunch of articles talking about progress and bugs, mapping out the velocity of Usenet articles in BSD groups to looking for change correlated. Mapping out the velocity of Usenet articles BSD group to look for change correlated with the court activity showed nothing of interest. That's what I did. I don't care too much. To look for. However, there were a number of articles across Usenet with titles like Linux or 386 BSD where people compared them. What the fuck? Where did it go? Where the fuck is it? Where people compared them. Many included minutiae such as specific hardware, but none talked about the lawsuit. I should go and check that 180 gigabytes or however much crap I have just to make sure. So I'm pretty sure that's true, but I want to confirm that. If I find one, I would have to say almost known, but I think it's 0. Although there's a first mover advantage theory, which is why people write history from the first successful implementation and forget everything else that came before. Although there's a first mover theory. Also, there's a first mover theory. First mover advantage theory. Where people write history from the... So this is the first time I'm reading this one. So... things like commas really sort of help my eyes out. So having this thing grammatically correct is really helpful for me, actually. More so than I would have imagined. Anyway, let's continue with this. Also, there's a first mover advantage theory where people write history from the first successful implementation, forget everything that came before it. There was digital currencies before Bitcoin, MP3 players before iPod, and social media before Facebook. Linux's timing was favorable, but there's more to success than that. So we have to reject the hypothesis that BSD was held back because there is no contemporaneous evidence. Tell me how wrong I am, go to the URL and denounce me at your leisure. Regardless, Linux has become a few orders of magnitude more prevalent than BSD and killed commercial Unix. How? Here's two possibilities, the great man theory and a social history. The second is harder. Let's try the first. It looks easy. It says some glorious thing happened, but you can't do it because you don't have the right genes. Unfortunately, that isn't useful unless you enjoy sulking about things you consider flops. But you're all rock stars, right? So what about the second? Using syllogisms, mere mortals did this. We are mere mortals, therefore we can do this, but only if we know how. Okay, fine, let's do two. The first is much shorter speech, a Carlyle-style hero worship about how great men should rule and others should revere them, a gushing mystical biopic. However, we've got a much harder job. And to do it, we must have defendable and falsifiable hypotheses. But first, here's some more jargon. Let me move this thing down. Hello? Isn't that a cool sound? Yeah, it's nice. Perhaps Linux was the second act of the personal computer revolution, personal software and personal hardware. If the center will not hold, and things fall apart, and mere Antichrist is loose upon the world, we might as well make it productive and get some nice software out of it. Maybe a free Unix needed a pool of hackers to build it on cheap computers with a robust communication network and avoid bad actors taking advantage of their generosity. Maybe. There's also the maybe nots, that falsifiable thing. Number one. Unix was thought to be really complicated. Actually, it seemed to be quite elegant and simple. The Unix source license was $200,000 in the 1980s, so of course it was complicated and magical, but that was marketing. Even 386 BSD, 20 years into Unix, was done by the Jolitzes, a husband and wife team. Just two people. Number two, community-based programs were thought impossible. There's an organization called Share who came up with the Share operating system in the late 50s, which was community developed. Share was eventually structured closer to a buyer's cooperative. See how that worked around the birth of the Unix? Let's go to Computer World 1968. During the past 4 months, Share has been working with IBM to define changes needed by users. When the company responded, 12 of the 13 requests had been turned down. Well, IBM, look what happens to you when you ignore the users. Oh yeah, Share was Los Angeles-based, so LA pride. Speaking of things that happened over 40 years ago, this is ancient history. Although Unix started in 1969, the first paper was 5 years later. Here's 4 principles extracted from it that will be useful for our journey. Number 1, leverage, don't invent. Doing beats planning, needs not desires. Use early, use often. Although each one may have its flaws, together they form a cohesion, even a synergy, if you will. Unix was designed for a class of computers that died out called mini-computers. They were about an order of magnitude or two, cheaper than mainframes and also less capable. Well, at first. People wanted to solve their tasks on cheaper machines because that's all they had access to. Roughly every decade, a new lower-priced computer class forms based on a new programming platform, network, and interface resulting in new usage and a new industry. That's Bell's Law, and it's from 1972. As mini-computers came on the market and became more powerful, Unix was there to leverage them to service people's needs. These new machines provided new context for new software. No, I can't drink without spilling shit. I've only been doing this for 40 years. I need to have a little sippy cup. And a little bib on me. These needs are only meant as examples. The point is the velocity of computer progress was faster than people's needs. I should say these are only meant as examples. No. I have to say these needs. That's I have to. Apparently, computer performance increases as a square of the cost of and transistors per chip doubles every 18 months. These are called Gauss's law and Moore's law. Together, it meant that the industry eventually ate itself through a multi-decade-long digestion. However, when new things come in, the people who get there don't get there easy. It's okay, though. Some of us are crazy and prefer it. AT&T was under many legal restrictions, and because of that, Unix was initially distributed as if it came out of the back of an unmarked white van. The mantra was part of the presentation or deck early in Unix, saying that you're on your own. Think of the adventure, the excitement. But who are you catering to with such a message? Where will their behavior guide things? It's not about welcoming everybody doing anything. With any of these efforts, you have to ask yourself who you're bringing to the door and what kind of behavior you're expecting. That's what separates a library from a soccer field. For example, Linus, October 1991. You also need to be somewhat of a hacker to try to set it up. So for those hoping for an alternative to Minix 386, please ignore me. It's currently meant for hackers interested in an operating system and 386 with access to Minix. I may have found a better quote for that. Where did I store it? I stored it on my laptop, which is now in sleep mode, and so I can't get access to it. Oh, that's fantastic. So the quote that I found, he lays out the different. He's like, well, if you're looking for something like professional, maybe you should go to BSD. If you're looking for something over here, maybe you should go to Coherent. And so it's him pushing people away and saying, oh, this is for me. If you're looking education, maybe you should go Minix and not come here. So it was him even doing more of this, and he did it a few times in different news groups. So yeah, he was really sort of creating a certain class. Anyway, you have maintaining focus about intentionally, not incidentally, but actually intentionally choosing what to ignore. You have to be a clear signal amongst our noisy world. Because you had to know what you were doing, Unix was initially introduced through engineering and technical people, and not through the conventional decision makers. But it worked, and by the 80s, Unix was mainstream. As both the consumer and producers of Unix multiplied, the suppliers differentiated themselves, succumbing to the trappings of the usual competitive markets by including the commons, trying to take ownership of groups and commonly held things by setting up barriers, thus locking them in, and growing their base by trying to be special, which led to fragmentation. There's this debate that I found between Linus, it's 99, and a guy named John something from BSD. Let me see if I can find on my history. I'd never heard of this before, but it's Tannenbaum level of John S. Dyson. I'd never heard of the John Dyson Torvalds debate, but it's pretty good. He's a FreeBSD guy, and he really sort of, this kind of fragmentation Linus brings up as saying this is what because we have the GPL, it prevents this from happening. And when you're under the classical BSD licensing, this is you have this type of fragmentation. And now BSD, there's 4 different mainstream kernels now. There's Dragonfly, FreeBSD, Open, and Net, right? And sure, it's not like the 80s, but yeah, it was interesting because, again, this might be me extracting what I want to read out of it. It's the same thing I talked about last night, is that I have too much of a commitment to my hypotheses, and so I might just read into it something that's favorable, but it genuinely looked like that it was agreeing with me. Anyway. What was I doing? I keep stopping. I shouldn't be doing that. Unix had infected everything from workstations to mainframes. Unisys, one of the mainframe makers, in an article in September 1997 issue of Computer World, predicted a tripling of Unix sales in 1 year. The problem with the infighting goes back to the chart with various blobs about computer classes. The threat is almost always coming from below. In this case, it was Microsoft and microcomputers, and not Nixdorf Cynix on an NS32000 versus Clix on an Intergraph Interpro. Oh, did I went away from it. In 1985, Microsoft argued that their Unix, which had an install base of 100,000, would be a multi-user version of DOS. In 1987, they said they didn't see it competing with their platform plans for OS2, which at the time was seen as a successor to Windows 1.0. Things changed, specifically that December, with the introduction of Windows 2.0 and later with Windows for Workgroup and NT. That was the real threat. Anyway, Xenix required 12 360K floppies, which was seen as bonkers. A 32GB microSD card is about 93,000 floppies, 190 meters stacked end to end. That's like a 2.5 minute walk. All that storage is now in the size of your thumbnail and costs as much as a taco on the west side. Anyway, software distribution used to suck. Speaking of Microsoft, that punch tape is how they distributed BASIC on the Altair. In the 1970s, it took about 20 minutes to load, and it wasn't stored on disk because the Altair didn't have one, just to keep the computer on if you want to use the software. The lower right is something called a type-in program. Software is distributed like this as multiple pages of hexadecimal. No, really, this is MLX format. They publish listing like this every month for years. You typed it in. There's no electronic reader. That's some basic code on the left first page, and it's not easy either. The QR code is this game running on an emulator in your browser. You can just scan it and tap on your phone. No typing required. If you want to scan and give it a try, you could only use the software that you had access to. I like how the QR code is still visible. There were also software user groups, which were convenient for the 1 in 20 people who lived near one. But for most, software meant retail, mail order, or copying a floppy from a friend. The bottom two methods had consumer overhead. For dial-up, you usually had to pay an expensive phone bill, and for internet, you probably didn't have it. 2400 BPS access to Genie in 1989, for instance, was $42 an hour, and that's how long it takes to get a megabyte over 2400 BPS. This means most people were only exposed to the top three groups, and it was difficult for smaller developers and non-commercial ones to get their software to the masses. Paraphrasing Marketing High Technologies, Bill Davidow, 1986, it's not a product without a distribution channel, or Linux's case, a distribution. The technology may have the potential to address the needs of many, but without specialists, redistributors, to put it in the hands of those customers, it will not succeed. Products are sold through distribution, not to distribution. Let's jump forward to why Linux question for a bit here. And while this diagram is up, Linux had high accessibility of the install media. March 1993, Unix World listed FTP repos, BBS numbers, and soft landing software who would mail you a copy of SLS on floppies. On floppies. Don't leave the price out. Just leave the fucking price out. Who and soft landing software who you could mail order copies from. You could mail order Let's try this again. Let's jump forward to the why Linux question here for a bit while this diagram is up. Linux had a high accessibility of the install media. March 1983, Unix World listed FTP repos, BBS, and soft landing software, who you can mail order SLX links from. And just do companies. Mail order Linux from. Just do that one. We know what we're talking about. And companies who you could mail order Linux from. Let's try this again. March 1983, Unix World lists FTP repos, BBS numbers, and companies you can mail order Linux from. Later, you can find Linux at coffee shops, libraries, and attached to magazines at the grocery store. That's true. Filling up a CD with Linux distro and cribbing software. Cribbing some how-tos, which took a long time to exist, was cheap content for magazines who just wanted to get an issue out. It took like 3 years before they actually had documentation. But let's go back to the problems. Depending on the distribution channel, updates had different logistics complexity, especially when considering updates from outsiders. For instance, if you wanted to update the retail Lotus 123 and have your changes appear on the shelf at Circuit City, you'd probably have to do it yourself and get arrested. It would have been fun though. Once there were online networks with storage and communication necessary to unlock multiplayer online mode for software development game, a new way to write software was created. Yaki Benkler described this as commons-based peer production in his book The Wealth of Networks. Let's go Linux 1991. I've enjoyed doing this, and somebody might enjoy looking at it and even modifying it for their own needs. It's still small enough to understand, use, and modify, and I'm looking forward to any comments you might have. I'd like to hear from you so I can add your software to the system. It's interesting, he didn't like source control, so he didn't really use CVS. And so it's just kind of, I don't know. Anyway, he must have done something weird. He eventually made a Git, but There's a whole can of worms I don't want to open up. Adding Minix things to Linux is fine, but how do contributors' contributions and updates work? Unless you can answer these questions clearly, progress will be slow, infrequent, and inefficient. I found an email he sent about porting stuff to Minix before he started Linux. I'm going to show it to you right now. I know. I'm derailing this thing so many times. Here it is. April 9th, 1991. Look at this one. I'm rather new to 386 Minix myself, but I've tried porting some stuff and have a few comments. And then he says here, if you want Emacs there, and he talks about like how difficult it is to port all these things. This was, so he claims to have started Linux in April of 1991. This is April 8th, 1991, so it's right before he started. So yeah, there's a couple other emails that he sent out, or whatever, Usenet articles he wrote around this time, which are curious about that. And so you can sort of see like how he's like, well, it's not really doing what I want it to. I don't know. Anyway. And what was I saying? Oh yeah. So I was just adding software optimization. I'm going to the next one. Adding, everyone has to agree on the terms and feel welcome, otherwise they don't come around here no more. So GNU made a Rooseveltian list of 4 software freedoms to define free software, but it's not just licenses. It's organization plus license. For our purposes, we're going to talk about the horizontal software, what's labeled adoptive on this chart. Essentially, how easy is it for modifications to become integrated and in the same distribution channels, other people to become a distributor or to share your product. You need a legal structure and organizational structure that affords this. An open shop that permits anybody to come in. Eric Raymond spoke to this in The Cathedral and the Bazaar. In the Cathedral model, which is tall, source code is available, but development is restricted to an exclusive group. Contrast this with the Bazaar model, which is flat, in which code is developed over the internet in view of the public. The vertical lines here from permissive to restrictive is a general continuum. Public domain is seen as too permissive in the eyes of GNU because you can relicense, reprivatize things. I've also read that copyleft and GPL are different from each other, but I never went to law school. If you zoom in, you'll see non-computer things. Let's go over a few. Bottom right is facts. People ought to be really hesitant to modify facts, and they're public domain. Above that, you have most religions. Anyone can preach the good word and start a congregation, but at least in principle, the texts are sacred. As we go up, we'll get jokes, recipes, human language, and at the top is folklore, which changes readily. As you move to the left of public domain, you get Wikipedia, which anyone can edit. On the restrictive adoptive side is social media. Anybody can contribute, but the platforms retain a bunch of rights. Classic commercial software is down in the hesitant and restrictive camp. The pink stuff is Linux related. Minix is down next to freeware and GCC in the hesitant category. Below the pool label Unixes, except for social media and Wikipedia. All of this is early 1990s and not 2024 accurate. Speaking of the past, let's go to the introduction of Minix. In 1986, commons-based peer production wasn't feasible. People didn't have the internet in a pocket like you do. Because of this prohibitive logistics around software distribution, updates, especially customer-initiated, Minix could only be Cathedral. Also, it was a product of Prentice Hall, who wanted to sell textbooks and instructional material for Tannenbaum. So here's the relevant parts from the announcement. It's not public domain. However, the publisher does not object to people making copies for friends. This is SneakerNet. If you want to sell it, which is the 2 categories above SneakerNet, retail and mail order, you need permission. In his book, you will find a postcard you can use to order the software. There's no mail order again, and he says he doesn't want to copy a bunch of floppies, as in do SneakerNet. Now, why does it say now cook? I can say, now Minix was adjacent to GCC. What's up with that? GCC, GNU was also Cathedral. Here's an example from an early GNU bulletin in 1987. We can see it listing out different distribution channels as they solicited funds to pay programmers to write more software, like a software engineering firm. They played a second role as a provider of copyleft and eventually software under the GPL, which came out a few years later. Every bulletin had a growing list of software by others that you could order basically at cost. You could get Net2 BSD and then BSD 4.4 Lite from them until 1995, after which they said they were working on Linux distribution, which never happened. It came from below. They didn't see it. That doesn't make any sense. Until 1995. because Linux came from below and they didn't see it. We're hitching their wagon. Road driving? How did that come through? Their wagon at the time to BSD. Then they dropped that and went back to working on Herd. You could get Net2 BSD and then BSD 4.4 Lite from them until 1995 because Linux came from below, and GNU was hitching a wagon to got disrupted like everybody else. Distracted, you fucker. You know, these things, they think that I'm like a much more mainstream person than I am. They should know me. And GNU got disrupted like everyone else. Then GNU dropped. BSD. And started working on a Linux distribution, which never happened. But they still love attaching their name to it. You could get Net2 and then BSD 4.4 Lite from them until 1985 because Linux came from below and GNU got disrupted like everyone else. Then GNU started working on Linux distribution, which never happened. It actually eventually became Debian. But they still love attaching their name to it. Oh. It's pretty funny. They played a second role as a provider of copyleft and eventually software under the GPL, which came out a few years later. Every bulletin had a growing list of software by others you could order basically at cost, which you could order. It's not basically at cost. Like Emacs was like hundreds of dollars. You could get NetTube BSD and then BSD 4.4 Lite from them until 1995 because Linux came from below and GNU got shipped like everyone else. Then GNU started working on Linux distribution, which never happened. But that didn't stop them from claiming they had a name. But that didn't stop them from claiming they had naming rights. I mean, no, let's not be snarky. I mean, the reason it didn't happen was because the guy that did it was Ian from Debian. So it's Ian at Debian. It's the guy that did Debian, Ian Murdoch. This guy who died sadly way too early. Yeah. And here, he wrote they don't actually say see here it is, overview of the Debian GNU Linux system. So this was the hitching of the wagon. So at that point it was Debian GNU Linux, not because Linux insisted on putting GNU in front of it, but because Ian Murdoch's project was affiliated with the GNU organization, which then they parted ways. And so then it became Debian Linux. They dropped the GNU. That's the real story there. But so to say GNU started working on Linux distribution, which never happened, I could say. I mean, I could say which became Debian Linux. Only then GNU started working on Linux distribution. Which left them and became Debian. Backing a Linux. How's this one? You can get NetBSD and then BSD 4.4 Lite from him into 1995 because Linux came from below and the GNU got disrupted like everything else. Then GNU started backing a Linux distribution which ended up breaking up with them called Debian Linux. Called Debian. That's how you do it. As far as distributing free stuff goes, there's precedents such as this one from 1996 trying to be a repository for public domain software. From smaller production producers such as code published in, say, Dr. Dobbs Journal. Oh, come on, let me just do viewing mode. Some assembly programs ran over 40 pages long in that publication that you, of course, were expected to type in yourself. Some people were looking for a more reasonable solution that didn't cost as much, but not all the pieces were there yet. All of these things require labor, coordination, and resources. How we instrument those lets some things get more better quicker. How we instrument those lets some things get more better over time. How we instrument those lets some things get more better. Better faster. Get better faster. Ideas are bizarre even when their implementations are cathedrals. For instance, there were many graphical desktop computers, even though each one was a proprietary restrictive project. The superstructures of desktop computers operate in the adaptive space. Pretend we have a concept called of a free operating system. We may not get all the parts right the first time, but the Platonic ideal exists. Well, kind of. It's as much a contemporaneous invention as anything else, existing in a pale, true thought suspended in our life stream. And we can go back to Vannevar Bush's Memex article, as we may think, in The Atlantic from 1945 to see the spirit of what we now call many things. Unlike products, Platonic ideals are collective projects owned by nobody. They are permissive and not adoptive, and not static abstractions divorced from human influence. They are ideas manifested from context. The map is not the territory in our industry. We're tasked with creating both through pure thought stuff. What a responsibility. We better organize. This is about the complexity of building software and not about electing people. You may have heard that commercial software began with Bill Gates' open letter to computer hobbyists in 1976, where he denounced sneakernet distributions of Altair Basic because he didn't get paid for each of the copies. That's not really where commercial software began. In the mid-1950s, software was in-house, coupled with hardware, or contract-based, as you can see in the 1959 ad for a programmer from Punch Card Data Processing. But the version of commercial software that has products for a computer you already own existed since at least 1960. No, really. There's another falsifiable thing. Bruce Perrin's chapter in Open Source, Stephen Levy, and Hackers, they allude to a Garden of Eden in the past from which we have fallen where all software was free. Really? Well, no. Here, 1966 claiming commercial software was a $100 million industry. And then in 1969, 11 companies worth at least $100 million each got together to form a trade group. Hardware vendors bundled software to lock in their customers like Microsoft did with Internet Explorer. It was as free as Windows is on a retail laptop. People were trying to DRM and patent software back in the 1960s. And more than one, I should say. And more than one succeeded. Maybe there was some idyllic Valhalla in the bubbles known as MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab, but the real world was up to the same tricks they are now. Anyway, deep bundling happened in 1968 and 69 vendor by vendor, and Unix arose from the primordial soup and is one of the oldest non-mainframe softwares that is still recognizable today. Recognizable because the family tree looks like a European dynasty. This Unix timeline covers a few years of the late 80s. Zooming in, and you'll see Minix, MIT Trix, SunOS, Mach, Xenix, from the house of free software AT&T or the kingdom of Microsoft. I'm still not a lawyer, but this is really confusing. Not only did the source and binary have different terms, but sometimes only certain organizations had access to them. For instance, if you're an educational institution with a pre-existing AT&T license, that you had access to BSD, I think. So a version might have multiple parents, each with different term sheets. It's a legal Habsburg. That's why a few slides ago there's a puddle labeled Unixes. Even the Unix term itself is a confusing mess. Raise your hand if you still think it's copyrighted by AT&T. No. 31 years ago, AT&T's USL sold the copyrights to Novell, who then donated it to the Open Group, which is now a standards organization. Some Linuxes have gone through that process, so Linux is now a Unix. Really? You're just finding out about that right now? This stuff is absurd. We need something with clean documented history, a clear license, and easy answers to all these problems. So Linux and effectively all modern open source projects have this solved. All development is open. The history is well archived, and OSIL approved licenses solve the family tree problems. The structures that's now ubiquitous is one of Linux's major contributions. Also, let's talk about the internal politics of building software. In the abstract penguin slide, we covered the outside aspirational curve, where things take decades and operations are strong, and opinions are strong in many. Operations strong in many. Yeah, that's true too. Things like paradigmatic ways of doing open source software development took 20 years to dominate because of the longevity and applicability of the more abstract solutions is also the same time frame as their implementations. But within that exists lower level Maslowian motivations, and keeping things there make them more actionable. Let's say your network card isn't sending out packets. We can say this bug is known, agreed upon, and demonstrable. So although it may not be easy, the labor path is traversable. Now a new network card comes out. You need it to work in Linux. That's a need. You can demonstrate and come up with an agreement on what that would look like. Now pretend you want that card to do something it wasn't designed to do. That's harder to demonstrate and agree upon. Oops. What the fuck? Have I just not been doing this for like the last two? To get that actionable, you need to pull the desire into the lower curve so the development cycle can encompass it. It's worth knowing that the Tannenbaum-Torvalds debate from 1992 illustrates this Tannenbaum-Chastek-Torvalds approach because it wasn't microkernel and Linux was exclusively on 386. Really, Linux was on these two lower curves, and Tannenbaum was trying to pull it up to the higher curves where things move far slower. That's where the hot research always is, people trying to make these higher level concepts more real. GNU heard as a microkernel approach. Stallman claimed in the early 2000s that's why it was taking so long and wasn't very stable. The higher level curves are unlikely to succeed except as superstructures of lower level functions, in the same way that our asymmetric approach to Platonic ideals happen on the back of incrementally more appropriate implementations, which is why you can snake a line from the 1950s IBM Share organization to GitHub. Through the process of clarifying the aspirations, they get moved to the concrete because they become material needs and bug problems. The clarity of the present stands in both the triumph and the wreckage of the past. Here, both an article and advertisement from May 1990. Sun says they have a cheap $600-700 computer. Here's a PC at about 1/10 the cost, which is fine if you can do some of the same things. Historically, the answer has been no, but referring back to the chart with knees and computer classes, this dynamic was likely to change soon, especially since 386 had technical features which made running Unix-style operating systems more practical. But that's not the only kind of price there is. How the fuck did that happen? I haven't gone the wrong direction. Anyway. There's also the price of time. Oh, I'm pressing it too low. I'm pressing like down here, and that's somewhere. Anyway. Okay. This is a conceptual, not a quantitative graph. Essentially, Windows is the easiest to get up and going. But let's say you wanted to do something like convert a bunch of files, sort the contents, pick a field, extract the values, do some operations on them. These things will get hard quickly. Early BSDs were a pain to set up, but they had networking before Linux. They were more professional. However, there were a few people working on it who tended to be more experienced, so they were busy and expensive. Linux was mostly students, which were famously cheap. Linux was also heavily hobbyist-oriented, which was usually meant that the system was more hackable. While the other Unixes, they presumed you had something important to do. The more difficult and time-consuming it is for a customer to use an information system, the less likely they are to use that information system. That's Calvin Moore's 1959. As the complexity of the problems became more intractable, the approachability of the lower levels and the internals of the system became increasingly important, because people tend to use the most convenient methods in the least exacting mode possible and stop as soon as minimally acceptable results are found. That's the principle of least effort. Hackers tend to build worlds where everything is possible, but nothing of interest is easy. Alan Perlis called this the Turing Target in 1982. Pulling yourself out of the target from a capable to usable system requires some engine to push it forward. Commons-based peer production can also be seen as prosumer, a producer and a consumer put together. It's used often for social media, where you are consuming other consumers' productions. Here, our engine is problem-solution integration, which keeps us in the bugs needs development cycle. With the Bazaar method of development, the changes reflect back quickly, which means that new users will have fewer problems with their different hardware, so that other people with, say, your network card, it will just work. But where do you find the people to do that? Well, you build armies, of course. Large networks are important. Their utility scales quickly with the size of the network because their combinations of groups grow faster than the utility of the groups that joined. That's Reed's Law. For example, if we start using Linux, we start using Linux. If you have a network card that doesn't work, you now join the subgroup of people becoming a we that needs the card to work. This only becomes an engine if we have the right people to complete the cycle we talked about. The first level here are enthusiast developers and bug fixers, followed by the curious and hobbyists, and then the business needs, and finally the people that can't have things fail. Arguably, one of the failings of the early BSDs is that they were too lopsided on the upper steps and couldn't get the virtuous cycle moving with enough velocity. Analyzing email addresses of about 2.5 million Usenet posts over a 2-year period. Why aren't you in viewer mode, and why did you just cycle back? There were almost always more commercial emails for BSD and more educational ones for Linux. So even though their general trend was ascending in staircase, Linux had more torque from the bottom groups. I call this Linux's revolutionary theory. The hacker vanguard forms a coalition with a personal computer proletariat, and a business-oriented bourgeoisie becomes interested, and finally the prohibitively assiduous aristocracy is able to use it. There is one last type of price, and that is of expertise. Whether it's your own or you're finding some cash, it's expensive. We're finding some cash. You could roughly assign a utility function as the capabilities divided by the effort required. Sometimes both capabilities and effort increases over time. Blender, for instance, is highly capable software, but also takes a lot of experience to use effectively. Many mobile and web apps, on the other hand, actually remove power user features over time to make the product require less effort while also making it less capable. Still, other software frameworks, for example, get Fredbrook's second system, a new version that's more difficult to use and leads to inferior results, thus becoming the inversion of the graph and decreasing utility of the project. Let's talk about the multiple arrows. In order to get a larger user base, you need a diversity of capabilities requiring a diversity of efforts. Linux was able to achieve this by outsourcing the actual packaging of the OS through distributions. This is another insight about the Bazaar software model. Since the entire structure is more flat and structural organization barriers are mostly removed, the markets naturally subdivide and form, and they can be quickly and readily addressed. Because we're doing social history, let's use critical theory Marcuse's idea of de-radicalization. The dominant structures, say markets, subsume the novel. However, because in bazaars, people can self-organize, they beat it to the punch, and can move faster than a market force, which is why open source decoupled structures are more dynamic and swift-footed than commercial approaches. There's a chart from Innovator's Dilemma describing different strategies and can be taken as technology gets better. You can push a market to higher end consumers, or you can stay with your existing customers. However, because of the horizontal development of Linux and the existence of distributions run by multiple organizations, it was able to do multiple strategies at once. Not only these, but any other ones that have been left out of the graph. A few slides ago, we saw how Linux was a horizontalist, bizarre approach to software internally. Let's look at the impact of this externally. The chart is taken from Andy Grove's 1995 text, Only the Paranoid Survive, describing how the industry moved from one-stop shop verticals to a horizontal structure. If we put this into aspirational space, this can be viewed as part of the same decoupling superstructure as the mainframes were doing in the late 1960s. The premise of this transition was a book called The Coming Computer Industry Shakedown by Stephen McClelland in 1984, quoting, "As software gains ascendancy, the keyword will no longer be customization, specialization, and market niche. The new world will be integration. System integration will be the most sophisticated and difficult task computer companies will have to undertake." That quote, being 40 years old, gives us the privilege of seeing what happened. Essentially, 4 strategies were developed to tackle this problem. The first is to impose on a vertical by claiming you're the standard, but in practice, only one player can do that, so OS2 died. Apple took a different route by being its own vertical, while Linux had to push the wheel out of the tar pit and needed enough people to do it. Luckily, timing was on their side. When the internet was mostly accessed over at universities, September annually brought in a flood of new people that had to be coached. As residential internet grew, the old guard termed 1993 as the eternal September, the beginning of the mainstreaming of internet access. For this to happen, cheap ISPs and web servers needed to exist quickly and support users, and Linux was there to provide. It's important to note that Linux was prima facie hobbyist and personal and use-oriented at the time, even though Linux Journal has articles in 1984 about it as a web server running ISPs. Contemporary texts such as Linux, Getting Started, Unleashing the Workstation in Your PC, or Plug and Play in Linux were in the lower two steps of our staircase, hobbyists and personals. The early Slackware, MCC, and SLS distros from that time also didn't include web servers or tools to run a business. The first people in that new use case didn't get there with clean off-the-shelf solutions. They played the scout role, clearing the road for the army to roll in, which is why the web server book in 1995 now includes Linux. Another benefactor of the eternal September is attributed to Linus's law. Given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. Let's look at a few various eyeballs. The first term slide claimed that Linux was mostly built by college students. Here's some evidence. After the first release in October, Linus got some help from a local friend, but by November, he had contributions from Hong Kong, MIT, and University of Utah. In December, contributions came from Calgary and Berkeley, and then Colorado and Maryland students contributed in January. So far, everyone's under 25, and there becomes an increasingly pressing need for a solution like Linux to solve new problems. And those needs more or less persist to this day. Apple is vertical, Microsoft is entitled, and Linux continues to climb stairs that have yet to be drawn. Here's a quote from Torvalds. I think the timing was good, even just a year earlier. I don't think it could have been done. And a year later, somebody else would have done something similar. These two bottom charts show how Linux now dominates the supercomputer and web server space. How's everybody doing? Are you still awake? Yes, that's typed in on the sheet. And as is this. This is long, and so let's have some fun. If there was a storefront named Open Source, what would be displayed in the windows? In fact, let's do some interactive theater. We are a group of people in 1985 trying to bring free software to the masses. Our marketing director just told us about the marketing mix with the 4 Ps, product, price, place, and promotion. In order to have a figurehead for the free software movement, we need to find a piece of free software that qualifies these conditions. It should be easy to try, acquire, and understand. It should have a low price of time, money, and expertise. I appreciate the suggestions so far. These are all excellent examples of free software. I especially like the elevator pitch for Emacs org mode. Before we settle on a project, I'm wondering if we've left anything out. Any suggestions from the audience? Oh yes, you sir, the man who I've known for over a decade. Oh, that's a great idea. Linux can be maybe Linux can be the window dressing of the free software movement. Or how about this? I have a better idea. Let's make an alt copyright pipeline where we have low effort things for curious PC users to try. Then we tell them our beliefs about our community and get them to up their commitments. As they do, they'll become more familiar with projects which take more effort and expertise, get more involved, and be an advocate for them. Over time, some of these people will aid us in reporting bugs, determining needs, and implementing desires to move our aspirational project forward and make it more tangible. In order to do this, we must be a welcoming community, by necessity, but also because we brought in the right people. So that's how it happened. Oh wait, how do we do it again? Where am I at? Yeah, I knew I was going to be way over. It doesn't matter. Final boss. Geoffrey Moore made this graph in his work, Crossing the Chasm, in 1991, and proposes as commercial products mature, users with different needs, different behaviors and expectations come around. There's 2 holes in the graph. The first group is the people who are aspirational and have a high tolerance for practicality. They're willing to go the extra mile and make something work. Then there's the small hole. In the graph on the right, with the electric car adoption on the right, you can see that small slump at the first circle. The next group is enthusiastic about the possibilities but prefer a lower effort, time, and expertise costs. Then there's a really big hole. That's the yellow hole in the graph. The next group is the difficult one to reach. They are looking for a working product and don't want to be hassled with inconvenience. Many products don't make it that far. I present Crossing the Open Source Chasm. The first group are passionate hackers trying to claw at the aspirational curve and bring it down to the bugs and needs. If they can keep their passions going long enough and make sufficient progress, then perhaps the music makers will come around and help recruit more passionate people to enlarge that base. That's the first pipeline. If the engine between the passionate and the enthusiast can be maintained in order to get to the problem solution integration wheel, the project can get pulled out of the touring carpet, and if the solution capability is divided by the effort demanded yields enough of a utility ratio, then a pragmatist will become interested and the chasm is crossed. But it's important to keep the pipeline well lubricated because you'll be facing the new challenges and use cases, and you'll need a few of those new users to slide the responsibility graph in order to grow the coalition as the law of division takes hold. The clarity of the present stands on both the triumph and the wreckage of the past. Sometimes, for a city to become great, it must first be destroyed, so that a new generation can seize the dream and try to execute it better. Failure and passage of time unbinds us from the commitments and gives us permission to kill our darlings and do a page one rewrite by naturally creating the space for us to try again, but only if we retain the liberties to do so. Here's a few historical examples. Does anybody know what these are? First one is a Bard television, an early mechanical television. The second one is a Cook and Wheatstone telegraph, predating Morse code. And the third one is an arithmometer, the first practical office calculator. Each of these have a different history, but they affected the same result. The aspirational curve eventually wasn't captured by a particular implementation. Sitting on the left of the curve, we'd like to intentionally accelerate the social technical processes, but it is a counterintuitive act, otherwise it'd be easy. Strong IP enforcement on strong visions diminish your chance of success. You must let go of that which you love the most. You may get the vision right, or the execution, or the timing, or team right, but you'll probably not all at once. Facebook, iPhone, Google, Amazon, they're all iterative executions of larger ideas owned by nobody. If you're working on a thing or have a dream, or then it's just you, then you are definitionally on the way left. You could argue that for certain use cases, Linux took over 20 years across the big chasm, and for some things, desktop publishing, digital audio workstation, photo editing, or social media, the free software chasm is still not crossed. There needs to be a certain kind of affection for the people, their needs, their desires, and aspirations, for these to eventually succeed. For, say, the GIMP to overtake Photoshop, the commitment to others with less responsibility is key, because that's how you get the new recruits. So whatever you're working on, it will take years and will manifest differently than what you thought. You have to not have codependencies with it. They will foster resentment, anxiety, and low self-esteem. Really, you'll probably become susceptible to the great man theory. If something is dying, maybe that's the fire you need in order to rebuild things. Listen to the needs and desires and ideas. Do one thing and do it well. Work together. Handle text streams because that's a universal interface. This is actually the Unix philosophy by Peter Sallis. But I'm serious about it. Good software advice is also good people advice when building software. Let's go to Tracy Goddard, Solve a New Machine, 1981. Looking into the VAX, West had imagined he saw the diagrams of DEX corporate organizations. He felt the VAX was too complicated. He did not like, for instance, the system by which various parts of... Let me drop that part. I don't have to be a perfect quote. I can as long as it's, he did not like the system. I can drop the for instance. That'll save me a beat or two. And then also there's a comma there, and I'm gonna trip over that if it's not grammatically correct. Because what is that car with parsing? Like I've got like a look ahead one, my eye is like an LR1 grammar. Looking to the VAX, West had imagined he saw a diagram of a DEX corporate organization. He felt that VAX was too complicated. He did not like the system by which various parts of the machine communicated with each other. There was too much protocol involved. He said the VAX embodied the flaw in DEX corporate organization. The machine expressed that phenomenally successful company's cautious bureaucratic style. Churchill said, "We shape the building thereafter they shape us." However, our buildings are different because the programmer, like the poet, works only slightly removed from pure thought stuff. He builds his castles in the air, from air, creating by exertion of the imagination, or so says Fred Brooks. Regardless, wrecking balls for code are cheaper than those for concrete, so don't be afraid to using them. Here's another Unix philosophy. This time, let's think about it in terms of people. Make it easy to write. What am I doing? What the fuck? That's why I want to remove this window so I can actually see shit. Make it easy to write, test, and run organizational efforts. Interactive use with humans instead of batch processing. Make do with smaller teams. You will need all of the engines to get over the chasms and move the project forward. Organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of a communication structure of these organizations. Melvin Conway, Datamation, 1967. We studied yesterday to create a better tomorrow. The future is ours to make. Probably. Yeah, so that's it. I'm thinking about making a secret slide for the obvious questions. So I can have like 1 or 2 or 3 secret slides. And so I can be like, oh, that's interesting. And then I can just like slide forward and then go to that one. Like, oh, secret slide 2. That's the question that you're asking. But I have to get the comment system up first. Yeah, we'll see. It's okay. There's a few edits I made here, but overall, I think it's solid. Except for consumer-based stuff. I don't know. I'll think it through. What is it, 4 o'clock right now? Yeah, it's 4:17. Yay! I should go to bed. I'm too old for this. All right, bye. Oh, Edifier. Edifier makes audio, and I have speakers from them. And I saw them at CES in 2020, and I said, oh, I have some of your speakers, and they work really well. And they were delighted to see me because they're not a big company. And yeah, and so they said, oh, that's so nice. Thank you so much. Here's a shirt. But they only had like the XL left, so it's really large. But yeah, I actually do have their speakers, and it's really nice. I showed them pictures on my phone. I said, hey, look, I've got your stuff. Yeah, the vendors really like that. I did that with Panasonic. So like, these are Panasonics. And I went to like the huge Panasonic booth at CES. These are my favorite earbuds. I have them on me all the time. And like, it was like, this is like, I don't know, it's like Mr. Panasonic or something like that. They're like top tier people there. This is CES, right? And you're like, these $9 things, I love them so much. Keep making them. There was more of a conversation I had with them. And I forget what it was. But there was a disagreement. I said, you should do X. And they said, no, I don't think so. Yes, something like that. And then when Amazon came out with their clone of the Panasonics, they did X. They did what I said they should do. But I forget what that was. Something about the material. But I think that was funny. Because, Amazon just clones the most successful products. So they cloned the Panasonics. And then they made a tweak of it. And they did what my suggestion was. And so it's like, dude, I mean, of course, I had nothing to do with it. It was just so fucking obvious that when they were cloning, they were like, oh, you're right. We should probably change. Like, like everybody saw it except for, Mr. Matsushita. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, Panasonic used to be called Matsushita. I think I'm going to end this now.